Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bassam Haddad, and I am very much looking forward to our current film and conversation on Kids Under Fire. Before we start and before I introduce our remarkable guests, and we are actually quite lucky to have the three people with us today. Um, Josh Rushing, Mimi Sayed, and Charles Blaha, known as Cobb, and I will introduce them properly in just a minute. Let me just say that this is part of a mini film festival that we are holding at George Mason University with collaboration uh, with a number of organizations, including at this point the Gaza and Context project under PalestineandContext.org, as well as the actual organizations around George Mason University, including the faculty and staff for justice in Palestine. We also have JVP, Jewish Voices for Peace at George Mason. We also have Prison Labor Justice Collective and the GMU, George Mason University Coalition for Palestine. In the past week and a half or so, we have shown a couple of other films, including The Encampments, which did extremely well. And we will be showing various films and having conversations with directors and co-directors and producers in the coming week, if not for a longer period, because since we started this film festival, we actually were approached by producers and distributors asking if we are interested in screening their films, which is nothing short of remarkable for us. Um, Let me, before we start the film, which is a relatively short film of about 30 minutes, let me introduce our guests. You will be able to find their full bio at jadaliyya.com. I know that it's difficult sometimes to spell Jadaliyya, and I will also, therefore, try to place the URL online, but it's Jadaliyya. So it's two Y's, Jadaliyya. All right. So with us, I'll read the names and introduce our guests, and then I'll welcome them all together. Joshua or Josh Rushing is a founding member of Al Jazeera English and the Emmy-winning senior correspondent for its flagship program on America, which is Fault Lines. Since launching the show in 2009, Rushing has investigated the human toll of systematic injustice, covering issues such as economic disparity, gun violence, immigration, criminal justice, war, and racism. His reporting has taken him to more than 60 countries across 5 continents, including dozens of trips to Afghanistan and Iraq. Also with us is Dr. Mimi Sayed, a board certified emergency medicine physician who's an assistant clinical professor at University of Washington and Washington State University. She is a fellow of the American College of Emergency Physicians. Dr. Sayed served in Gaza from August 8 to September 5, 2024, and December 3rd to December 31st, 2024 at both Al-Aqsa Hospital and Nasser Hospital. Dr. Mimi, يعطيك العافية. Charles Blaha, known as Cobb, you will hear the word Cobb, and that's Charles, retired from the State Department in 2023 after a 32-year career. Before retiring, he was director of the Office of Security and Human Rights in the State Department's Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor from 2016 until 2023. From 2013 until 2016, he was director of the Bureau's Office of Western Hemisphere Affairs. Sounds like a very big job, Charles, the Western Hemisphere. Prior to that, Mr. Blaha served in the department's International Organization Bureau's Human Rights and Humanitarian Affairs Office, and as counselor for the Political and Specialized Agencies section of the U.S. mission to the UN in Geneva, where he worked primarily on issues related to the UN Human Rights Council. I'd like to thank you all profusely for joining us for this screening, and welcome to everyone. Ahlan wa sahlan. Um, Let me first, before I introduce the film, is there anything, Josh, Mimi, and Charles or Cobb, that you'd like to share in a few short seconds before we start?
Sure. Thank you for having us, and thank you for showing this film. We call it a film, but it's an episode of Fault Lines, and Fault Lines is this half-hour documentary style investigative program about America that airs on Al Jazeera English. Um, we've done quite a bit of work on Gaza in the last few years, and just to say, like last week, we were nominated for 7 Emmys for those films, and won a handful of other awards as well. But I say that just because sometimes in the U.S. I think perhaps we're not as known or have credibility, but I think right now the work that Fault Lines is doing is I've been in Al Jazeera 20 years, and this is clearly the most urgent time for the kind of journalism that we're doing, and I couldn't be more thankful for you for sharing it.
Dr. Mimi or Cobb, if you'd like to share anything.
Yeah, the one thing I'd like to say, first of all, thank you very much for highlighting this issue. We don't hear a lot about these kinds of things in the American press, and what I hope uh, everyone will take away from this is what Fault Lines focuses on, which is a sense of injustice and a call for action to hold your government and specifically the State Department accountable for our policy toward Israel.
Mimi, I'm assuming you want to reserve your comments until after, or
I would just like to say that this film is very graphic, as your viewers probably know, but also that it was very necessary, and I'm very glad the way it was presented because it also demonstrates that, we have a luxury to look away, and this is a luxury that the people of Gaza do not have. And so I think that this film captures what it's like to be in Gaza, and also firsthand what we witnessed as physicians there. So.
absolutely. I'll say a couple words about the film and then we'll start right away. The write up for the film or for the Fault Lines investigation says the following: the war in Gaza has killed about 17,500 children since October 2023, most of whom have died in indiscriminate bombings. Yet a deeply unsettling subset of these deaths stands apart: children arriving at trauma centers with gunshot wounds. Doctors in Gaza report seeing these cases nearly every single day. Their accounts, corroborated across hospitals and over time, suggest a disturbing pattern. This is not random, it is systematic. This film investigates these atrocities through the testimonies of healthcare workers from the United States who witnessed them and tells the story of 4-year-old Mira El Darini. Mira was shot in the head outside her family's tent in Khan Yunis, but survived against all odds. Thanks to Dr. Mimi Sayed, whom we are very fortunate to have with us on her first mission to Gaza. Mira's case is not isolated. American doctors describe treating dozens of children with nearly identical injuries, linking these horrors to the Israeli military, supported heavily by U.S. funding. Without further ado, let me start the film and then we will proceed with hearing from our speakers. And then, should we have time, we will go to questions. Thank you all for joining us again. And thanks to everyone who's joining online. This is a wonderful opportunity to witness these matters firsthand.
It's hard to imagine a child playing one day and then not existing the next day.
Since the war began in 2023, healthcare workers have been some of the only people permitted to enter Gaza. Israel has not allowed foreign reporters independent access.
It was like an apocalyptic movie. I mean, it really didn't seem real. I've been to Gaza a couple times this past year.
It crushes you on the inside.
Fault Lines interviewed American doctors around the country about their experiences volunteering in hospitals in Gaza.
Thousands of children are being mutilated.
Every day, every day. There wasn't a single day that we didn't see kids in the emergency room, in the operating room, in the morgue.
Even though these doctors served in different hospitals at different times, they all witnessed a disturbing pattern.
More and more, I started to see children with penetrating injuries like gunshot wounds.
Gunshot came from out of nowhere. Your kid was just playing on the playground and got shot.
That's it, one wound.
It seemed like every day we had at least a child coming in with a gunshot wound. At some point, I thought, God, this just can't be. There has to be a mistake.
Most of the time, you have a gunshot wound to the head. These seemed targeted.
After 5, 6, 7, 8, I came to the realization that, oh, somebody is shooting children.
It was August 24th. It was a morning, and it was during a mass casualty incident. A little girl who's 4 years old, whose name is Mira, she was brought by her parents. She had a single wound to her head. I was able to get her into the CT scan. On a CT scan, we saw a bullet in this child's head, in her brain.
Dr. Mimi Sayed treated 4-year-old Mira Aldarini during her first trip to Gaza in August 2024.
This is where the bullet entered. See how it takes that path from there? And it's lodged right there into the back.
What's the prognosis here when you're looking at this?
Patients with wounds to the head or brain matter out, we can't do anything for them. So she was designated as someone we couldn't save.
هذا الطلق كان سبب زهق حياة بنتي، بيمثل اليوم المشؤوم اللي صار فيه الحدث. كانت الدخول اللي ساعد دخول الآليات الكواد كابتر. لو طقك رصاصة يعطيك العافية بتموت على المطرح.
الساعة 8 الصبح يعني تقريبا لسه بنصحى من النوم، تاريخ 24/8 يعني. هو تاريخ عيد ميلاد أختها الكبيرة. كانوا فرحانين وقومي يا ماما ويلا وعملنا كيكة عيد ميلاد رهف.
كانت الناس بتركض في الخارج بسبب إطلاق نار من الكواد كابتر. كانت خايفة ومهلوعة.
فجأة شفنا وجهها كله صار دم وعرفنا إنه بنت انصابت برصاصة براسها.
تم إصابتها في الرأس من مقدمة الرأس.
Witnesses told us that Mira was shot by an Israeli drone, or quadcopter armed with a gun. While these drones are known to exist, confirming their use in Gaza has been difficult despite dozens of reported incidents.
فحسيت الحياة خلص وقفت في هذه اللحظة، بأنه كيف ميرا، أنا بدي أفقد ميرا يعني كيف بنتي هذه روحي. طبعاً ساعتها يعني مش عارفة شو أعمل، أصرخ ولا أعيط ولا أحمل بنتي.
عملتها زي هيك وضليتني ماشي فيها أستنجد في الناس، يا ناس انقذونا، تعالوا بس واحد يساعدنا، سيارة تنقذنا.
She was moving very little, clearly injured.
Had someone triaged Mira before you saw her?
Some physicians had already seen her. I started to examine her, and one of my colleagues came and said, no, don't waste your time. But what I noticed about her was she was still moving. I felt like I could still save her.
So what'd you do?
So I intubated her. It's a small handheld blade, a blade that kind of goes into the mouth, and then you put a plastic tube inside, and you can breathe for them as a result of that.
Hi, Mama.
تم استخراج الرصاصة من حجرات الدماغ من الخلف فشلوها وركبوا جهاز بيبي شنط لحجب السائل الدماغي من التسرب.
This was Mira's second brush with death. Last year, as her family fled south, an Israeli missile fired on them, killing one of her aunts. Another aunt lost her leg.
والله أقول لك أكذب عليك لا مش ما خفتش إنه كانت يعني ما بين الموت والحياة.
The target at the end of a scope is unmistakable that they are a young human being. And when that trigger gets pulled on that target, it is not by accident at all, ever.
Children are easy targets, right? They are generally defenseless. It makes sense to target children if you're trying to target the future.
Faultline spoke to 20 American doctors who volunteered in hospitals across Gaza since the war began. They all reported treating children with gunshots, often fatal.
It's not a rogue soldier that lost their ethics. It's widespread throughout the entire Gaza Strip. There's a definitive pattern of Israeli soldiers targeting quite specifically children.
I didn't want to believe that children were being shot. Nobody wants to think that other humans are capable of annihilating children in that way.
I had 18 cases of children with shots to the head. When you see one or two coming in that time that I was there, then I could say maybe it's an accident, it's crossfire. But when you see that a child is being shot in the head every day, multiple times, in the abdomen, in the chest, those are intentional. Someone is doing that.
According to the Gaza Ministry of Health, children make up over a third of the death toll in Gaza. Nearly 16,000 have been killed, mostly by bombing. Doctors say it's impossible to know how many were shot, since Gaza's healthcare system has been destroyed by the Israeli military.
Israeli forces have killed so many children in Gaza that it is most likely we will never know all of their names.
Al Jazeera has been tracking incidents of children shot by the Israeli military. In one case, Israeli soldiers fired at 3-year-old Imad Abu Kra and his 2 cousins on their way back from buying fruit. One cousin, Hadil, who was 20, died immediately. But Imad still showed signs of life. As neighbors tried to drag him from the street, Israeli soldiers continued to fire. His other cousin, Aya, survived.
صار طخ مرة تانية وأنا جريت وطخوا على هدير واستشهدت ووقعت على الأرض هي وعماد وكان بيتحرك قبل ما يستشهد وبنادي علينا وبتطلع على الناس.
الطفل الصغير اللي عمره 3 سنين ونص إنه طلع بس عشان سمع كلمنتينا وبده ياكل حبة كلمنتينا. فلما ابني مد ايده وحاول يتحرك فأعدموه برصاصهم.
In another case, Israeli soldiers shot 13-year-old Nahid Barbach and his older brother Ramez outside their home in Khan Yunis. The family was trying to evacuate south. Nahid was first shot in the leg. When he tried to get up, Israeli soldiers shot him twice more, in the back and in the neck. He was holding a white flag. When Ramez went to help him, he was shot in the heart.
أنا في حالة هستيريا. أنا خلاص أنا مش عارف. أنا كل اللي بدي بدي أولادي. أنا بدي أولادي. يمكن يكون لسه فيهم الروح. يعني على أمل إنه لو أجى إسعاف يمكن فيهم الروح. يمكن نقدر ننجدهم. زي النافورة دمه من صفحته ورقبته ورجله وارتمى. عطول ارتمى على الموت. عطول.
You kind of want to scream at the top of your lungs about it to everyone.
I know that to some degree I'm complicit in that, right? I'm in this country, these are government officials that are making these decisions that we as a people have elected. I pay tax dollars.
How could you watch this and let it go on? How could you not say something? In what world is it okay to shoot a child in the head? If I can't speak up for something like this, what good am I?
The United States is Israel's largest military backer. For months, American doctors returning from Gaza warned that children were being shot, yet U.S. support persisted. In January, some of the doctors traveled to Washington, D.C. to urge lawmakers to take action.
It's very difficult just to acknowledge that I live in this country that's supplying the bombs or the guns or the ammunition for that bullet that was in Mira's head. This I want to show you is a little girl I treated. She's a 4-year-old named Mira. She got shot by a quadcopter sniper. This is Mira. She's a 4-year-old little girl. She was shot in the head. The meetings seem very rushed, like we're just trying to say what we're there to say and then just leave. This is Mira. She's a 4-year-old little girl. She got shot. I feel very futile. I feel like I'm not doing anything. I thought that they would be shocked to learn some of the things that we were seeing. Just seeing a child with a bullet in their head is a powerful, shocking thing to see. But it almost seemed like it wasn't new information. They say a bunch of non-substantial stuff. I mean, it's just like stuff. But it so misses the mark. I was met with some skepticism about the actual bullet and it being authentic. Yeah. I touched her, I saved her, my hands treated her. I held her in my arms when I went back last time, and for them to question that really happened it breaks my heart.
When you tell a U.S. lawmaker that you're seeing a pattern, what's their response?
They just shrug their shoulders or, shake their head, but nothing substantial. A child should not be arriving with a bullet in their head. If that happened in the U.S., there would be law enforcement agencies all over the hospital. This is a regular occurrence in Gaza.
When I have to step over 8 dead babies to look for the ones that have a chance to survive.
We have more than 2 decades of evidence pointing to that this is a regular occurrence, and Israeli soldiers are never, ever held accountable. And so if they've been allowed to kill children with complete impunity, then it's absolutely not surprising that they would carry out these actions and attacks in Gaza, just the same as they've been doing in the West Bank.
Have you ever thought through what's the strategic reason to shoot a child? What message should we take from a military that would target children?
I've thought about it a lot, and the only conclusion I can come to is Israeli soldiers are shooting Palestinian children because they want to. And I think they do it because they've been allowed to, and nobody has stopped them.
Is it a war crime to intentionally target a child?
Yes. Targeting a child with lethal force, whether it's live ammunition, a drone strike, any other type of targeted attack, is absolutely a war crime.
Not only is it a war crime, but it's also against U.S. law to provide support to foreign military units accused of human rights violations. It's known as the Leahy Law, after Senator Patrick Leahy, who sponsored it.
I worked for Senator Patrick Leahy.
His senior advisor, Tim Reeser, drafted the law.
There's probably not a unit in the Israeli army that either hasn't been trained and or received equipment from the United States. But it is the only country they're aware of that the law has been so consistently not applied to.
Has it ever been applied to Israel?
Not that we're aware of. Had the Leahy Law from its inception been applied as it was intended in the West Bank and Gaza, then you would think, as in this country and in every country, that it would help to prevent those types of crimes from occurring because people would know that they could be held accountable.
I took care of a 19-month-old child who was shot in the thigh while she was playing outside of her tent I took care of a 9-year-old boy who was shot in the right buttock while he was walking next to his tent. I did take care of a child who was brought in dead on arrival who was shot once in the left side of the chest, so through and through to the heart.
I went to the neonatal ICU in the morning, and they took me to a room where a mother was holding her baby. And they said this baby was shot. And I was like, what do you mean this baby was shot? The mother was breastfeeding Mustafa. A quadcopter came and shot baby Mustafa in the head, and that the bullet went in one side and went out the other side.
Kids that were being shot, it's every day.
Most of them were under the age of 10.
Would a pattern of children shot in the head or chest qualify for the Leahy Law, or would you need to know each child's situation and case?
Any one of those cases could be a basis for triggering the Leahy Law, and if there's a pattern, then that's all the more persuasive that this is not just some random mistake. It's rather a result of a culture in which those committing those crimes have no fear of being held accountable.
Israeli soldiers also operate in a culture where violence against Palestinians is not only overlooked, but often condoned by prominent politicians.
והילדים בעזה, הילדים בעזה הביאו על עצמם את זה. אגב, אני לא מפרידה בין המחבלים הרוצחים לבין החברה האזרחית בעזה. זה אותו דבר מבחינתי. מבחינתי אין הבדל ביניהם.
This impunity is further supported by loopholes in U.S. aid to Israel.
Israel's different.
Charles Blaha led a State Department office responsible for vetting thousands of allegations of human rights violations by foreign military units receiving U.S. funding.
So there is a special Leahy vetting process for Israel.
Of countries receiving vast U.S. assistance, only Israel has a separate vetting process, the Israel Leahy vetting form. Unlike others, Blaha says the U.S. accepts Israel's investigations without question, with final Leahy decisions made at the highest levels, including the Secretary of State.
Why do we have this form for this one country?
Because Israel receives assistance that's untraceable. It's a very elaborate, Byzantine, complicated, delay-ridden, high-level process that has been at fault for the State Department never finding a single Israeli unit had ever committed a gross violation of human rights. I signed off on that. I signed off for two reasons. I believed at the time that the State Department would implement that process in good faith. And I believed at the time in the Israeli military justice system. Both of those beliefs turned out to be incorrect.
So you've gone 180 degrees on two major beliefs that are consequential in a lot of people's lives. How does that sit with you?
I don't really know what to say. If I'd objected at the time, I certainly would have been overridden, but my name wouldn't be on the approval line. I was mistaken, I was wrong.
A cynic from the outside would see the vetting form as Byzantine by design. The purpose and the point of this was to offer obfuscation for Israeli forces to do what they want and not be hassled by U.S. laws.
I recognized at the time that it was very, very complicated, but I believed it would be implemented in good faith. I didn't think it would come to this, these thousands and thousands of deaths.
Against all odds, Mir lived.
انت بنت قوية يا ميرا صح؟ عشان هذا الوجع كله انت تحملتي وصرتي شاطرة وصرتي أحسن من أول إن شاء الله صح؟
ماما
يا ماما
هيك وقفة لا
How are you, doctor? How are you?
When Dr. Syed went back to Gaza in December, Mir was regaining her ability to walk.
Mira.
The last time I saw her, she wasn't even opening her eyes. She was basically just kind of laying there after she was extubated.
بتقول لك إنه حطت مناكير
manicure.
على الفنجر.
Wow. She's talking normally, like.
ميرا
Yeah, all normal like before. So language is great. Standing, walking.
وأنا ماسكة إيدها.
Yay, Mira! Oh, wow.
As Mira gets older, she will need additional surgeries, but she won't be able to get them in Gaza.
It's still swollen.
Days after Dr. Syed left Gaza, Mira's family survived a third attack. She was getting physical therapy when an Israeli bomb hit the building next door.
طبعا انه بعد الاصابه في الطرف في الراس انه بنتي كمان تنصاب كمان مره فكان هذا الجنون عندي بحد ذاته.
Mira was spared, but her mother Isra was severely injured. She lost her leg.
إيش أخذتي في الحصة؟ إيش أخذتي في الدرس مع المس حنان؟ مش حتكون حياتي زي قبل. لازم أكون أقوى من هيك، لازم إني أنا أكون فعلاً مش يأسانة. بس أنا بحاول أدعمها قدر الإمكان نفسياً، حتى رغم وجعي، رغم مأساتي اللي أنا فيها، بدعمهم نفسياً دائماً.
Oh my God, I seriously can't move. Oh my God.
I was at my daughter's award ceremony this morning, and I was in a room full of small children, and they were celebrating their teeth, who lost a tooth today. Suddenly, I just had this picture. I had a child in my last mission whose name was Sammy, and his face, his entire face was blown off. And I was holding his teeth, his mandible in my hand. And I just couldn't help thinking, like, how could this be the same planet?
If I was the only one who said, hey, I've seen children shot in the head, it's very easy to dismiss. If 40 other healthcare workers are saying the same thing, that's a body of evidence that's incontrovertible.
In Gaza, I saw the concept of innocence of children or protection of children was purposely destroyed with intent.
There will be some children that are broken and will forever be broken.
You're wiping out a certain number, you're maiming a certain number, and you're permanently, mentally, and emotionally disabling the rest, and that's going to be passed down to the next generation. So this is how you cripple a society.
They say that Gaza is the graveyard of human rights. And for me, it was really the graveyard of my belief in the human race being able to challenge its worst impulses. I don't know that I can ever get that back.
If this was your child, would you want the world to turn their back on you? Would you want people to look away? And these kids that I left behind, they're continuing to be threatened with death all the time.
So we see these images every single day for the past 570 odd days. I have no words. I study these matters. I teach them. I protest against them. We research them, and I have no words. Thank you all for putting this together. We do have to talk about it, although I am not in the mood for talking. I hope you are, but we will talk about it. There's so much that I'd like to ask, but I first would like to ask Josh, if you can just contextualize for us in your comments the film and share with us anything you'd like to share, and then we'll go to Dr. Mimi to tell us about her experience, and then we'll move to Cobb to share with us his commentary.
Yeah, so the idea for this film began last October. I was watching Democracy Now! And I saw Dr. Farod Sidwa talk about a recent piece in the New York Times where a number of doctors who had served in Gaza contributed to a piece about what they saw. And there was a massive backlash against the Times for it, and there were accusations that that it was fake and that they were lying. And the Times actually defended it and said, no, we've seen the evidence. We've chosen not to publish it because we think it's too difficult to look at, but we have fact-checked this. And in this interview, Farrow said to Amy Goodman that he had a growing body of evidence that children were being systematically targeted, but that when he worked with American journalists, each time he gave them evidence, they raised the bar. Their editors would come back with higher and higher standards and not run the story. And I'm thankful to work at a place like Al Jazeera English and on a show like Fault Lines, where I knew that would not be the case. And so I contacted Feroz, had a conversation with him, and he put me in touch with an entire group of doctors who had served there, and we spoke to over 20. And in speaking to them, one after the other, after the other, after the other, their stories were eerily similar. Like they could have finished each other's sentences, even though they didn't all know each other, even though they served at different times, even though they served in different hospitals and different places. They kept saying kids, gunshot wounds, precisely to the head, to the chest. And it just, they're devastating to hear. And so we arranged to interview a number of them on camera to do this. And we thought, how do we, pull this together in a piece? And Fault Lines has been working with a production team in Gaza that I have to give so much credit to. We've done at least 3 episodes now, a full-length film as well called The Night Won't End, with this team in Gaza. And the fact is that they produce really beautiful cinematic work, and they do it under conditions that I do not understand how they're able to do it. I don't even understand how they're able to charge a battery or keep a lens clean, and yet they're producing images that I think the world should have to see. And so we came up with the concept after having talked with Mimi and knowing she was going back, that we would film with Mira's family, film the reunion with Mimi, and that we would interview these doctors, a handful of them, and use them kind of like a Greek chorus, where they would work as the conscious of the piece. We could have made a documentary about these doctors. They're incredible. I mean, these are busy professional people who are setting aside their professional lives and have their own families to go and be in Gaza. It's incredible that they're doing it. But what I noted with spending time with them was that these are people who compartmentalize. They have to for their jobs. And I get that. It's kind of part of my job too. But it was easy to see through that and see how haunted they were by what they saw. Mark Perlmutter, who's in the film, was at Ground Zero on 9/11. He was there that day. He was in Haiti, I think either first day or second day after their massive earthquake. He's been in disaster zones all over, and he said that what he has seen in Gaza um, is worse than all the others put together combined. Like, it's really haunting the doctors. And we could have made a documentary about the doctors, but the truth is we always wanted to center the children. We even went down a rabbit hole for a while because a number of the stories were about quadcopters. And we spent a good month reporting everything we could out about quadcopters. At the end of the day, even though there are dozens, if not hundreds, of reports of quadcopters operating in Gaza, it's accepted fact there that there are armed drones operating in Gaza. We couldn't produce a single image of one. And it occurred to us, you know what, that's not the story anyway. We're on the wrong end of the barrel here. The story are the children. That children are being targeted in this way and that the world is allowing it to happen is unconscionable. And one of the doctors, Tammy, said that, you know, she worked in the ER in Southside Chicago and she's seen enough children shot, but that over in Gaza, it took her, and these are her words, an embarrassingly long time to recognize that it was a pattern. She kept wanting to think it was collateral damage, it was a stray bullet. But if it was collateral damage, the question was collateral damage of what? Like, no one else would come in a lot of times. It's just kids. And it's not just a bullet anywhere. It's often a bullet to the head, bullet to the chest, and sometimes both. And that's impossible to be an accident. So I wanted to use the doctor's testimony as something that could really be presented, if not in the court of law, the court of public opinion, that how could you argue against this? These are credible witnesses. You know, some are men, some are women, some are Muslim, some are Jews, some are not religious. They don't know each other, and yet here they are, basically testifying to witnessing war crime after war crime after war crime. And I don't ask it in the piece, but I leave it, the question that it begs, where's the justice?
Thank you, Josh. I have to also remind everyone watching that this is occurring at a time when we are actually witnessing 67 days of complete blockade of Gaza, of food and medicine, which is leading to starvation, already led to the hospitalization of almost 70,000, if not more, children. Please feel free to update these numbers. And the risk of starvation, especially of children, is now superseding 1 million. So we're not talking about a phenomenon that took place and we're moving forward. We're not looking at the past. We're looking at a point that has actually been exacerbated and is getting worse, a point in time that is getting worse. We're talking about the present, and unfortunately, it looks like the future as well. So I just wanted to share that. Mimi, Dr. Mimi, your work shows, perhaps one of the most damning pictures, especially given the evidence of deliberate targeting, which is always set aside and ignored and marginalized or completely overlooked by onlookers, especially in the United States and maybe a couple of other countries. Can you tell us about your own experience, and feel free to use the PowerPoint? I can actually move to that screen if you'd like me to.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thank you for doing all of this. This PowerPoint is ready. If I can go ahead and start, and I can just talk through that. There we are. Are you able to see that, Bassem?
1 second. I'm trying to. So we have the PowerPoint, and you can start it anytime. You might be able to see
Okay,
it on.
great. So this is, I'm Dr. Mimi Said. Of course, I'm actually from Chicago. I was born and raised and trained in Chicago. I
Sorry,
also,
Mimi. Sorry to interrupt you, but did you want to play it full screen? We can see the other slides, and it's not full screen, so that
oh, it's supposed to be full screen. Let me see if
it'll
I
be
can.
just a little bigger, especially for the.
Do you want me to share it full screen or not?
If it's possible, yes. It is not
Yes,
full screen. Yeah.
Okay, let me try again.
If that's what you can do, I can try to increase the size of it here, but it's easier if you can share full screen.
Can you see that?
Yes, but it's not full screen. I think you might want to hit the icon at the bottom near the volume, to the left of the volume, left of the minus sign, I think.
Okay. Did that work?
On your bottom right.
All right. Got it. Does that work?
It hasn't changed. It's that sort of a screen icon at the bottom right of what I'm seeing. Maybe you're seeing something different. At the bottom
It's a
right,
screen, yeah.
there's a slider.
I see that.
Near the slider to the left, there is an icon. I think this is it.
Present review.
At the very bottom.
Right. Sorry, that's all I can. I'm not sure why it's not working.
Yeah.
I can do the whole. Is that showing it?
No. Let me see if I can. It's okay. We could make it out.
Let me try this. It's not working. Yeah, I can't. I see my full screen, but I'm not sure what you can see. Can you see the screen? The first slide that I'm on right now?
Yes, we are. We can see the screen. It's just that we can see the other slides on the left, and we can see the.
Yeah. Okay.
It's okay. I think we will be okay.
Okay. Well, I'll just go ahead and start. Like I said, I'm Mimi Sayed. I'm from Chicago. I have seen quite a bit of gunshot wounds and penetrating trauma, but nothing really prepared me for Gaza. There's really not anything. There's no training. There's no specialty that trains you for what you see in Gaza. And this the stuff that I'm about to show you is extremely graphic. I gave this presentation just recently, and Josh told me I should give an even stronger warning that this is very graphic in nature. And so this is my official warning that this is very graphic in nature. Again, I feel that it is the least that we can do is to watch and to look at these images because people in Gaza don't have the luxury to look away. This is just a picture of the Israeli occupation force. When you actually enter Gaza, this is what the checkpoint looks like. There are guns pointed at you. It's almost it's kind of terrifying as a physician. I don't have military background, but every person, every humanitarian worker is kind of met with guns pointing at them. Even before October 7th, things were very restricted. Some things like chocolate weren't allowed in. Food, water, electricity, everything is regulated. Going into Gaza, I wasn't allowed to bring crucial things like medical supplies, medications. I had to smuggle in a laryngoscope, which is what I used to save Mira's life and other children's life. But even something simple like that, I had to hide because they simply just do not allow it. This next slide is obviously very graphic and again demonstrates that gunshot wounds to the head were extremely common. These are all through different children. The child in the center there is just a very, very tragic story. He was brought in dead and carried in by a random person, a man that thought that he actually he drove over him with his car. This was during a huge mass evacuation during the time, and at that time there was a quadcopter heard overhead, and everyone started running. They heard shots, they heard running, and they started running. And just a few minutes after he brought him in, we were examining him, and he had two holes in his head that appeared to be gunshot wounds. And soon after that, his mother ran in tears looking for him and said, "Is that my son?" She had lost track of him in that mass evacuation in that crowd and heard gunshots. So he was shot and then wasn't seen by the car and run over. But these were all children of different ages and obviously cannot be mistaken for adults. All came in dead. We had this countless times, day in and day out. These are just some of the pictures that I got, but there were many that we weren't able to photograph. This is a type of injury that we saw that was very common, and I wanted to talk about it because it's almost exclusive to the Israeli military, and it's this tungsten shrapnel that's cube-shaped. And it has a very high melting point. It's made out of tungsten, and the reason I mention that is it's very, very destructive. So this very tiny piece of shrapnel actually cavitates and liquefies everything in its path. We would see these fired from drones at times of mass casualty, mass evacuations. So when people were congregating, when there were soccer games that kids would be playing, families would be sleeping at night in their tents. We would see these small little wounds like you see in the center here. And usually the patients would come in dead, a lot of them children, because these tiny things would just completely annihilate whatever was in its path. And since children have small structures, it would kill them. And this syringe I'm holding here is just a small amount of this fluid that would be oozing from their bodies. And we would be, whenever they came in, we would see this fluid and we thought it was a chemical or something. And it turned out this is just subcu tissue. This is fat that's completely liquefied because of that tungsten. Another common injury is brain evisceration, especially in pediatric patients. This was due to barrow trauma or shrapnel injuries, very common and something you should not ever see. And if you did see, would be maybe one or two times in your career. But we saw this so commonly. This was a little girl named Allah who came in December when I was there the second time. And again, I was able to save her life, as you can see in that little picture on the bottom there, with this laryngoscope that I smuggled. And so again, she was labeled as someone that we couldn't salvage because of this head injury. But we were actually very lucky. I was able to save her as well. And in this little video, she says, I'm okay now, doctor. Shukran. But again, she is left with this this injury that's going to be lifelong. She needs a bone graft or titanium plate. She has only a skin flap covering her brain. She could get injured at any time. So again, we can save lives, but there's only so much that you can do. Another common injury was this traumatic amputations. We didn't have the resources to take care of these many times. We didn't even have tourniquets. You can see me preparing to cut this leg off on the left side with trauma shears because there was nothing we could do. They were you can see in the far right picture, his foot is actually underneath his leg, and we would a lot of times just take our trauma shears and cut this off with just scissors, basically, because we had no medications to give them, no sedation many times. This happened every single day, many times a day. Another thing I just wanted to show you, give you a glimpse of what it's like. This video on the left here, I'm doing a very critical procedure to evacuate blood from the heart. And there was a bomb that was struck right outside of the window where I was standing. And it's very loud. I was already dealing with a mass casualty incident, and I was the only physician in the room there. And you can hear So you can hear in the beginning the bomb, it shook the floors and shuttered the doors, and another mass casualty was brought in as a result while we were already overburdened in that poorly resourced hospital. The second, So that video just demonstrates the chaos of a mass casualty incident. I'm sitting there in blood, and the medications that we did have, they were ineffective because of the high temperatures. So I was yelling for more medications, but I gave him about a horse-sized dose, that teenager there, and he was still moving around because I realized later that those medications were just ineffective due to the temperatures. And also mentioning that I'm the only physician in that room. Those were two trauma bays that had patients filled up, and I was running between two rooms back and forth while more mass casualties were coming in. This acronym is not something you should see very often, but unfortunately in Gaza we write this on the chest of children when we don't have paper to write on for medical records. But wounded child, no surviving family. There's about 40,000 children right now who have lost either one or both parents. This child here was a 6-year-old little girl that we were trying to save. She was the last member of her family, and she actually died the next day. This happened so commonly in Gaza that we were writing this on medical records all the time. Another thing I wanted to mention that doesn't get much media attention is the medical conditions that have been ignored and now denied care. This was a mother I saw, a 29-year-old woman, a very tragic story, who came in during a mass casualty bleeding from this tumor that you see on the left. That's a breast tumor. It was the size of an olive just some months before that. And when I looked at her records, this type of breast cancer was incredibly treatable and curable, even before October 7th in Gaza, if she had the resection, the surgery, and also the chemo for it. But because she was denied care abroad by the Israeli government, she was denied 4 times. She came in bleeding to death from this tumor because it was so vascularized. I was able to give her 2 units of blood, but the efforts and the lack of resources, we couldn't do anything for her. She had 3 little kids on the cot with her. I gave a balloon to them to distract them, but she ended up dying soon after that with her kids right next to her on the cot. So it's just the denial of care and the lack of resources that is completely preventable also deserves attention. And I want to remind you, this is not self-defense. These are the patients that we saw. The majority of the patients we saw, people, unfortunately, they were small children that came in dead. We could do nothing for them. And all of the other doctors could testify to the exact same thing that we witnessed. This, unfortunately, now is happening, and this is malnourishment, severe malnourishment. There hasn't been food entering Gaza for almost 3 months, and every single day there are multiple children dying of severe malnutrition that is deliberately manufactured by the Israeli government and the U.S. government. This question I get asked quite often, which is, what does Gaza mean to you? And these children represent what Gaza means to me. These children are patient and kind and loving, and all they want to do is be children. They want to learn and play and laugh like they are, and they just want to live. And they deserve to be humanized just like every other child on this planet. So just a couple thoughts I want to leave you with is, how did we get here? A lot of people say, how is this allowed? How did this happen? And it's because of the dehumanization of Palestinians. It is so blatant and obvious due to many reasons, but also because, when it's out of sight, it's out of mind. People choose to have cognitive dissonance because it's easier. And then the second major point I want to point out is, when we talk about Gaza, especially me and my other colleagues that are very vocal, we are called anti-Semitic. We are called Hamas sympathizers. And I refuse to accept that anymore. I will not allow people to say that. The statements that I make and my colleagues are making, which is shooting children in the head, mass starvation of children, all of those things are wrong. Those are standalone statements that should not have any rebuttal, that should not have any buts after that. There is no but October 7th. There is no but Hamas if I say that mass starvation should not be weaponized. And I implore you to not let people say this to you, and to not silence you, to not scare you into being silent. The last quote here is from Rachel Corey, whose family I'm very close with and live very close to, and I see regularly. But she said this a couple of weeks before she died in 2003 when she was killed by an Israeli bulldozer in Rafah. She said, I am witnessing this chronic, insidious genocide, and I am really scared and questioning my fundamental belief in the goodness of human nature. This has to stop. I think it is a good idea for us all to drop everything and devote our lives to making this stop. I don't think it's an extremist thing to do anymore. And I couldn't, these words just couldn't resonate more with me. I devote every ounce of my energy and being to speaking out against this, and I won't stop.
Thank you, Dr. Mimi. I would like us to give Cobb a chance to provide us with his reflections before we could continue speaking. But Dr. Mimi, there's so much that you shared that in terms of, I mean, of course, the images, but also the words you use to describe the situation that should actually, you know, tell the story in and of themselves. Those words that you used, and I have many questions. And as we talked before, we might need to have a separate conversation if you'd like, on your experience. But let's move to Cobb. Charles, if you can share with us your reflections before we speak all together or hold a conversation, perhaps answer a question or two from the YouTube channel. If people can add the word question before they ask, we only have room for a question or two, and then we'll have to break because we have, we've kept you all for more than an hour now. Cobb, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. And Bassam, thank you for hosting this. Josh, thank you very much for making this film, and Mimi, thank you so much for what you've done in Gaza. So what we have seen and heard just now is enormous injustice. Fault lines, Josh said at the beginning, this is about injustice. In the face of such injustice, what can we do? I know it feels hopeless, but it's not. We have tools at our disposal. And one of the tools that I'm most interested in, and I hope other people are interested in, are U.S. law. The U.S. law with regard is not being followed with regard to Israel. You saw in the film that I was in charge of an office that enforces the Leahy Law worldwide. Not many people know what the Leahy Law is. The Leahy Law says that U.S. assistance may not be provided to foreign security force units that commit gross violations of human rights. Well, you just saw a bunch of gross violations of human rights. Not one of those units has ever been prohibited from United States assistance. Every unit that did that to those children is currently eligible for United States assistance. Also, in view of the over 2 months now that Israel has blocked humanitarian aid into Gaza, U.S. law also prohibits assistance to countries that impede humanitarian aid. That law is not being enforced with regard to Israel. And so these are very reasonable asks, and reasonable asks that everyone who's watching this should make of the United States government. We don't need new laws. We don't need a new policy. We don't need new funding. We don't need new programs. All we need is to ask the United States government to obey the law. This is something that should be inarguable. And that demand in all of your hands should be something that you should use with your representatives, that you should use with senators, that you should raise at every time you can. No one can paint anyone as some sort of radical or as being anti-Semitic for simply asking that we obey our own laws. So there are tools in your hands, and that's something that you should use. The right now, one of the things I'm doing since I left the U.S. government is I'm working for an organization maybe some of you all have heard about, Democracy for the Arab World Now, Dawn, founded by Jamal Khashoggi. Dawn is supporting a lawsuit by 7 Palestinian and Palestinian Americans to compel the State Department to implement the Leahy Law with regard to Israel. And so the best thing that you can do is to be well informed and to be active. And I wish more. I would like to see more peaceful protests simply demand that the United States follow its own laws. I'd like to see more protests demand that we follow the Leahy Law with regard to Israel, that we follow the law in our Foreign Affairs Act that says that the United States should not be providing assistance to governments that prohibit and restrict humanitarian aid. So what I think I'm going to do, I think I'm going to stop right here because I really think we need more time for questions and discussion. So I'll turn it back to you, Bassam.
Thank you, Charles. Let me start. I mean, there are a couple of questions that have actually been sent internally to us from people who, for some reason, are texting me from our community or emailing me because I sent out the announcement. But before I get to that, there's only a couple of questions. I'd like to ask you all to sort of reiterate what you think, given your context and given your own experience as journalists, as government officials or former government officials, and as doctors and human rights interlocutors. What explains this phenomenon? And we're talking about the US, we all live in the United States. What explains this phenomenon of people looking on and forget not being outraged, but people looking on and thinking this is justified? A year and a half on, especially with respect to children, where the evidence is incontrovertible that there is a targeting, and you have witnessed it firsthand, especially Dr. Mimi. I know that we mentioned dehumanization, but I'd like us to just talk about this because this is this silence or this support is a huge part of the machine, which thankfully is being slowly overturned. But it takes a long time for these things to have an effect on policy. And I'm saying overturned in terms of public opinion, where this is eventually, evidently changing the polls for now. So I'll like your answers, if you don't mind, in the same order you spoke, so there's no confusion.
In my opinion, we're at a state where it comes to information and media and journalism that it is so partisan, biased, and misleading that tell me where you get your news and I'll tell you what you believe. Or tell me what you believe and I bet I could tell you where you get your news. And there's something wrong with that. The American media picture of what's happening in Gaza is wholly inadequate. I think people are seeing through their social media, particularly TikTok, what's actually going on the ground. That's why there's an active effort within the US government to shut down TikTok. They say it's because of China, but multiple Republican lawmakers have said privately and been recorded that it's actually because of what young people are seeing in Gaza. It should really make you wonder why they don't want them to see that. I think particularly with how much the U.S. is funding it. Since October 7th, the U.S. has given $18 billion to Israel for this genocide. If you look at what countries spend on their own militaries in the world, the last year that I could find good data was 2023. An $18 billion military budget would be third in the world behind the US and China. So the US is spending more on Israel's war than Russia spends on its own military, or the UK, or Australia, or Iran. And yet turning around and telling its own people it can't afford universal health care, education, or even these days, cancer research. And the only way you can get people to act against their own self-interest that way, the only way you can get them to act against basic human rights is you have to control the information systems that they're watching, where they get their information. And that's where we are today.
Mimi, I know you mentioned this in
Yeah,
your.
yeah, I think that there's multiple reasons why this happens. There's different layers. Obviously, it's not one simple answer, but to Josh's point, yes, there's a lack of knowledge and willingness to be aware. And even when there is that knowledge, there's this level of cognitive dissonance. And this is not new, right? This even happened during the Holocaust. Americans knew about this. Even though there wasn't social media, there was newspaper, and they did know about it. Many people did know about it, but they chose to look the other way because it wasn't directly affecting them. This is actually on a whole new level. This is completely live streamed and happening in front of us. But also to mention that wars are very lucrative. And you know, Cobb, you could speak a lot more about this than I can because I don't have the expertise. But wars are lucrative, and when things like this is happening, there's a lot of silencing of dissent, and that's what's happening right now. And it's easy to silence people who are okay with being silenced, who are scared of speaking up, or just simply don't want to know because it's so disgusting, the acts that are happening in Gaza, that they would rather look away. But that's why it's so important to have this multi-pronged approach, is to arm yourself with knowledge, but then not to be silent, and not to allow the elite powers to take over and make these decisions.
Yeah, Mimi's point about knowledge is key. So all of you watching this have gotten some knowledge today. And I hope you've gotten some knowledge about some of the tools that might exist under U.S. law that would be very effective ways of proposing viable solutions. The United States, I think most of you know this, is the world's #1 arms merchant. And we are providing arms to Israel that are doing these kinds of things. Sniper rifles, 2,000-pound bombs. And simply by limiting those types of transfers, that would have a huge effect on Israel. For the United States to even declare that one single Israeli unit is prohibited from receiving United States assistance would have a big impact. In terms of answering your question, Bassam, what explains this? Well, I think one of the big explanations in the U.S. is politics. Israel has a very powerful lobby. Our representatives and senators are very aware of that and very conscious of the possible consequences of taking on the Israel lobby. I think a particularly powerful political stream are so-called Christian evangelicals who believe our current ambassador to Israel is former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee. He believes that God gave all of that land, which he calls Judea and Samaria, to Israel. So these are some of the things that we're confronting. But I think one of the main things, and one of the things that I hope people watching this and listening understand, is one of the big enemies for people like all of us is a sense of futility, is a sense that we can't do anything. And that, I think, is wrong. What we have seen in this country is a sea change in attitudes. If you look at polling, more and more people are coming to realize that unconditional United States assistance to Israel is not something they agree with. And for the first time in the U.S. Senate, there have been resolutions of disapproval for arms transfers to Israel. Those are firsts. They failed, but they're firsts. And what I would encourage everybody to think about, one of the things that I think about when I'm thinking about this lawsuit that I'm advising, when I think about doing stuff like this, is a quote from a Protestant theologian who was active in the 50s and the 60s, who some of you may have heard of, named Reinhold Niebuhr. And Reinhold Niebuhr said that history has always reserved its highest praise for people who worked for peace and for justice without too much hope of success. And sometimes the indifference to success provided the stamina that made success possible. So I would ask all of us to please do what you can to stop this. Each of us has a different role we can play. Josh has his role, Bassam has his, Mimi has hers, I have mine. But every one of us can do something to try to put a stop to this.
Thank you. There are a few questions, and then I will, release you, as it were. One question that is actually repeated by a few people who, which we are frankly prioritizing from George Mason. Although I will come to the one or two questions that we've received from audiences outside. To Mimi, I'll paraphrase and I'll combine several questions. What was your experience with the parents of children that you were treating? People who saw their kids mutilated in one way or another, or just losing their lives right in front of their eyes.
Yeah, it's a surreal experience. It does feel like you're on a different planet when you're there. I remember a mother who came in with her 8-year-old. And this was not her kid that died, but it was the father of the child. And this was an 8-year-old little boy who was just standing there completely dissociated, watching his dead father on the floor. And I had to pronounce him dead as soon as they arrived. His legs were completely amputated. His skull was open. And for an 8-year-old child to stand there and witness this, I couldn't. I mean, I had no words at the time, and I've really never cried during work and during my job because of the reason we compartmentalize. But I couldn't help but cry each time. And that's just one example. But this child was standing there completely catatonic, staring out into space. And that happened all the time. We saw this all the time. Mothers bringing their dead babies, carrying them in wrapped in blankets and laying them on the floor. And we would open the blanket up. And before I could even touch the child, I knew that the child was dead. I didn't even have to take a pulse. I mean, and there were many times that we would, just for optics, for some reassurance, do like chest compressions or, give the illusion that we're trying to help this child live, because I can't even imagine as a mother bringing my child in and the doctor just looking and saying there's nothing I can do. So it's a feeling that as a mother myself of small children, it was indescribable, and it felt I want to crawl out of my skin each time that happened. I had to take small breaks, walk outside the emergency department out of the trauma, and just I want to scream, and you can't scream because there's people everywhere. There's no place to go and decompress. So it it was a surreal feeling and nothing that I ever imagined. No feeling in the world would have prepared me for that experience.
Sorry, I think something, I don't know what happened. There was a glitch. This is for you, Josh, from actually several people, including a question from YouTube and in the comments section and um, on X and from our community. So I'll combine them in asking you what are you guys doing to um, take this production from Fault Lines and, you know, um, expand the reach beyond Al Jazeera viewers to major networks and so on. And is this the kind of thing anyway that networks do? Because people don't pick up other networks' documentaries, but there are large audiences, and I know that. I mean, some of the questions, um, for some reason, assume that there are not other treatments and films on the same topic, and there are numerous ones since almost the first month, investigative reports and so on. But this one, at this point, with this sort of access that you all have, what are some of the efforts that you are making to expand the reach of this particular investigative report?
So Fault Lines has been covering this from the beginning, and like I said, we're working with journalists on the ground within Gaza so that you really get a sense of the ground truth there. We have a full-length film called The Night Won't End. It just won a major award, but I can't remember if that information is embargoed or not. But it's also just been nominated for multiple Emmys. Another episode called Starving Gaza about them using starvation as a weapon of war, also just nominated for an Emmy. Another episode called All That Remains, where we follow a young 12-year-old girl out of Gaza who loses her leg. And we follow her journey to an American hospital where she's trying to get a prosthetic. Also just nominated for multiple Emmys. And then this is our fourth film, and we will continue. We also just released one last week called Made in America about Israel's attack on Lebanon and how that was funded by the U.S. And we are now putting together our season for the fall. Fault Lines comes out as 8 episodes in the spring and 8 in the fall. So we're just starting to work on the episodes in the fall. We will continue to cover this. No other network will pick this up, not because of the topic, just because that's not what networks do. I mean, we would never pick up an NBC show or show it or something like that. But what we are doing to get this out, this film has been screened at the Columbia School of Journalism about a week or two ago. Xavier University in Pennsylvania. It's been screened at Busboys and Poets in Washington, D.C. And now this screening. we're going to start reaching out to have more screenings in the fall. If anybody wants to screen this, please feel free to get in touch. You can find my information through joshrushing.com. But the thing is, you don't need my permission. This film is on YouTube, free to the world. Feel free to share it, or do what you want with it. We put it out there for anyone to have it. And that's kind of the best we can do. Beyond that, we just keep telling the stories.
Thank you. Charles, last question, and then we will wrap up. Also combining things and adding my own 2 cents. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your candidness and your honesty in saying exactly what happened and how you changed your mind. And now you're no longer an official at state. Recently, I mean, just like right now, almost, we began to see some changes taking place, even in Congress, even among quote unquote the far right or the right, if you will, either, because the Democrats have actually kind of began to switch after January in terms of actually saying the word ethnic cleansing and critiquing the president's use of these fantastic ideas about the Riviera and so on. And recently, we saw the veto or the overturning of the bill that aimed to criminalize supporters of BDS, of boycott and divestment of Israel, to the tune of fining them $1 million and a 20-year jail sentence and so on. And those included people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and folks on the right of center or far right, however you want to see it. That's less important at this point. Also vetoing it on the grounds of America first, which means that it's about what's good for us, not any sort of compunction regarding humanitarian issues and Palestinians' human value. So my question to you, and some of the questions that have sort of appeared in various ways, given that this is actually taking place now, and given that one of the reasons it's taking place is that the polls about public opinion are themselves changing. So this is actually following suit. A lot of people don't realize, they think that people or politicians just make up their minds based on just what they think, but they're also paying attention to these polls where the popularity and support for Israel has dramatically been dropping, dramatically in the sort of relative sense to past decades. And my question therefore is, how difficult is it, and what kind of pressure one is under when working with government as an elected or non-elected official or as an appointed official? How difficult is it to go against the grain? And I know that people have actually resigned, like Josh Paul and several others, but what are the risks that people take? And if you can tell us a little bit about that would be good.
The answer to your question is very difficult, very difficult. As critical as we can be about the State Department and about the U.S. government in general, there are some people inside who are trying really hard to change things. And I think principally of the people who remain in my old bureau, in the Bureau of Human Rights. At least we have it for now. And I think of some of them, and they are fighting. But the answer is, it's very, very difficult. I think one of the ways to deal with this is to ask a very legitimate question. And that is current U.S. policy toward Israel, unconditional provision of support, is that in the United States' interest? Is it in our interest to give $17.9 billion to Israel? Is it to pursue this war, which many Israeli military and intelligence officials say, accomplished all its military objectives within the first 6 months. Why are we financing this? Is it in our interest? Is it in our interest to be associated with a government that is killing children? Is it in our interest to be pursuing policies that that create hostility to the United States worldwide? Is this in the interests of the United States of America? And President Trump says that his policy is America first. Okay, is what we are doing, is what we have seen this afternoon, is supporting this in America's interest? That's a perfectly legitimate question. And again, I go back to what I said, is what is wrong with saying that the United States should obey its own laws with regard to Israel? We should not fund units that commit gross violations of human rights. And by the way, we are funding units that have killed American citizens. And is it in the United States' interest to provide assistance to foreign security force units that have killed American citizens? We should be outraged at the Palestinian deaths. But if we're going to talk in terms of America first, how in the world can that be in our interest? So I think the answer is that it's very difficult, but it can be done. I think it will become easier as attitudes change, but old attitudes die hard. And we all have to understand that we are doing the right thing. We are on the right side of history, and we really have to persist.
Thank you. I have kept you here for too long. My personal observation as at this moment, based on what we have seen in terms of the film and what's likely to come, and given the background that the Israeli cabinet has unanimously voted to finish the job, basically complete the genocide in Gaza, with very little, with nothing coming out of Western Europe or the United States to sort of to address these words, decisions, and ongoing action that is actually manifesting already, whether or not these words were uttered or decisions were made. That's such a bleak, dark, sort of apocalyptic outlook. Mimi is there. I will leave us with Mimi's sort of commenting, unless somebody wants to say something. Is there anything left in terms of what at least children can withstand?
Do you mean in Gaza right now? What, I'm not sure what you're asking. I'm sorry.
Yeah, is there? I mean, if the blockade continues and the starvation, expands, but what are we looking at? I mean, is there a prognosis as to maybe even as to what the plan is? Is it to sort of encourage the spread of starvation and then disease and sort of, I mean, haven't we reached rock bottom?
Yeah, and every time I think we've reached rock bottom, it gets worse. So each time I've gone there, I said they can't get worse, and it just gets worse. At some point, that death is the only fate, right? You can only withstand so much as a human being, as an organism. But there is so much destruction, and there's One Health bulletin that I was reading from last year, and the level of destruction and the long-standing destruction that has already been done in Gaza is just the ceasefire alone is not going to solve, right? So there's contamination from sewage. There's the water still is extremely contaminated. So even if you did start allowing food in, there's so much more that needs to be done. But if we continue at what's happening right now, this is a famine. This is the entire population now is being starved. My colleagues right now are telling me that they're only eating one meal every other day. And when I was there in December as an NGO worker, I was receiving about 500 calories a day. And that was me as a humanitarian aid worker. So the locals were receiving almost nothing. And now it's 10 times worse. So the only, path that we're on, the only route we're on is death. Unfortunately, that's the reality of the situation. You can only go so far without food, fuel, shelter. And now the temperatures are getting warm, so you're going to have more infectious diseases around, and flies and the polio vaccinations were never rolled out. So there's unfortunately that future is bleak, but changes have to be made right now in order to stop it. It's not completely hopeless.
Thank you, Dr. Mimi. Thanks, Josh, and thanks, Charles or Cobb, for your participation and for all that you do. It is just unfathomable that in the past we used to think that the information is not out there. Otherwise, things would actually begin to change in any significant way. And now the information has been out there. This has been going on for a year and a half, and the policies are doubling down. I'm not sure what kind of world we live in. In all cases, we will all continue to do our work. And I hope that the message that you are delivering in this powerful production and other things that you're doing, I follow Fault Lines and have been for some time, and deeply appreciate the investigative reporting, and hope that we can continue the conversation. And I always say under better circumstances, but at this point, I don't even know when that might be. Thank you all for joining. Shukran to everyone.
Shukran. Thank you.
Salam. Thanks to all the people who joined us also online and otherwise. Take care.